The Golden Sayings of Epictetus. 51. When thou goest into any of the great, remember that another from above sees what is passing, and that thou shouldst please him rather than man. He therefore asks thee, in the schools, what didst thou call exile, imprisonment, bonds, death, and shame? I called them things indifferent. What then dost thou call them now? Are they all changed? No. Is it then thou that art changed? No. Say then, what art things indifferent? Things that are not in our power. Say then, what follows? That things which are not in our power are nothing to me. Say also what things you held to be good, a will such as it ought to be, and a right use of the thing of sense. And what is the end? To follow thee. 52. That Socrates should ever have been treated by Athenians. Slave, why say Socrates? Speak of the thing as it is, that ever then the poor body of Socrates should have been dragged away and haled by main force to prison, that ever hemlock should have been given to the body of Socrates, that should have breathed his life away. Do you marvel at this? Do you hold this unjust? Is it for this that you accuse God? Had Socrates no compensation for this? When then for him was the ideal good? Whom shall we hearken to, you or him? And what say he? Anytus and Miletus may put me to death. To injure me is beyond their power. And again, if such be the will of God, so let it be. 53. Nay, young man, for heaven's sake, but once thou hast heard these words, go home and say to thyself, it is not Epictetus that has told me these things. How indeed should he? No, it is some gracious God through him. Else it would never have entered his head to tell me then. He that is not try to speak to anyone thus, well then, let us not lie under the wrath of God, but be obedient unto him. Nay, indeed, but if a raven by its croaking hears that any sign, it is not the raven, but God that sends a sign through the raven. And if he signifies anything to thee through human voice, will he not cause the man to say these words to thee, that thou mayest know the power of the divine? How he sends a sign to some in one way, and to others in another, and on the greatest and highest matters of all signifies his will through the noblest messenger? What else does the poet mean? I spake unto him erst myself, and set Hermes, the shining one, to check and warn him, the husband not to slay, nor woo the wife. 54. In the same way, my friend, Heraclitus, who had a trifling suit about a pretty farm at Rhodes, first showed the judges that his cause was just, and then at the finish cried, I will not entreat you, nor do I care what sentence you pass. It is you who are on trial, not I. And so he ended the case. 55. As for us, we behave like a herd of deer. when they flee from the huntsman's feathers in a fright, which way do they turn? What haven of safety do they make for? Why, they rush upon the nets, and thus they perish by confounding what they should fear with that, whereas no danger lies, nor death or pain is to be feared, but the fear of death or pain. Well said the poet, therefore, death has no terror, only a death of shame. 56. How is it then that certain external things are said to be natural and others contrary to nature? Why, just as it might be said if we stood alone and apart from others, a foot, for instance, I will allow it not natural should be clean. But if you take it as a foot and as a thing which does not stand by itself, it will seem it, if need be, to walk in the mud, to tread on thorns, and sometimes even to be cut off for the benefit of the whole body. Else it is no longer a foot. In some sense way, we should conceive of ourselves also. What art thou? A man, looked at as standing by thyself and separate. It is natural for thee in health and wealth long to live, but looked as a man and only as a part of a whole. Of a whole, it is for that whole sake that shouldst at one time fall sick, at another brave the perils of the sea, again know the meaning of want, and perhaps die an early death. Why then repine? Knowest thou not that as the foot is no more a foot, if detached from the body, as thou in like case art no longer a man? For what is a man? A part of a city, first of the city of gods and men, next of that which ranks nearest it, a miniature of the universal city. In such a body, in such a world enveloping us, among lives like these, such things must happen to one another. Thy part, then, being here is to speak of these things as is meet, and in order then as befits the matter. 57. That was a good reply which Diogenes made to a man who asked him for letters of recommendation. That you are a man he will know when he sees you, whether a good or bad one. He will know if he has any skill in discerning the good and the bad, but if he has none, he will never know, though I write to him 1,000 times. It is though a piece of silver money desired to be recommended to someone to be tested. If the man be a good judge of silver, he will know. The coin will tell its own tale. 58. Even as a traveler asks his way of him that he meets, inclined in no wise to bear to the right rather than to the left, for he desires only the way leading whither he will go. So should we come unto God as to a guide, even as we use our eyes without admonishing them to show us some things rather than others, but content to receive the images of such thing as they present unto us. But as it was, we stand anxiously watching the victim, and with the voice of supplication call upon the augur, Master, have mercy on me. Vouchsafe unto me a way of escape. Slave, would you then have aught else than what is best? Is there anything better than what God's good pleasure? Why, as far as in you lies, would you corrupt your judge and lead your counselor astray? 59. God is beneficent, but the good also is beneficent. It should be seen then that where the real nature of God is, there too is to be found the real nature of the good. What then is the real nature of God? Intelligent knowledge, right reason. Here then, without more ado, seek the real nature of the good. For only thou dost not seek it in a plant or in an animal that reasoneth not. 60. Seek then the real nature of the good, in that without whose presence thou wilt not admit the good to exist in aught else. What then? Are not these other things also works of God? They are, but not preferred to honor, nor are they portions of God. But thou art a thing preferred to honor. Thou art thyself a fragment torn from God. Thou hast a portion of him within thyself. How is it then that thou dost not know thy high descent? Dost not know whence thou comest? When thou eatest, wilt thou now remember who thou art that eatest and whom thou feedest? In intercourse, in exercise, in discussion, knowest thou not that it is a God whom thou feedest, a God whom thou exercisest, a God whom thou hearest about with thee, O miserable, and thou perceive it not? Thinkest that I speak of God of silver, of gold, that is without thee? Nay, thou bearest him within thee, all unconscious of polluting him with thoughts impure and unclean deeds. Where an image of God present, thou wouldest not dare to act in thou as thou dost. Yet when God himself is present within thee, beholding and hearing all, thou dost not blush to think such thoughts and to do such deeds. O thou that art insensible of thine own nature and liest under the wrath of God. Okay, I will stop there. I'll pick up again on 60 next reading. Okay, thank you.